Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 22 of the Fifth Meeple Board Game Podcast. We're a group of diverse friends who offer our takes on the latest and greatest board games to hit our table. I'm your host, Daniela, the Goofy Noob, and I am joined today by the Collector.
Hey, this is David.
And the Intellectual Introvert.
Hi, everyone. This is Chris.
And the Deluxeifier.
Hello, this is Pete.
In today's episode, we dive into two games that take production and, quite honestly, price to the extreme. We'll start in 19th century Germany, arranging rooms and crafting corridors as we do our best to create the castles of Mad King Ludwig. Then we go even further back in time to ancient Italy, drafting deeds, laying out lots, and manufacturing monuments to firmly establish the foundations of Rome. And finally, because we just can't ever help ourselves, we'll take it to the next level, pitting these games against each other in our ultimate showdown, the Battle of the Funnest. But before we put our plans in action, David, what is our topic of discussion for today?
Yeah, since we're comparing these two pretty high-priced games, the topic of today is going to be, are board games costing too much money nowadays? And if so, why do you think that? And is there like a range or a limit that you have on like a top number that you would pay for a board game?
So let's get a little history there then. So David, you've been collecting for years now. Chris, we'll talk about Alien Frontiers for a second. That was one of the first games I think you bought or your son bought.
It was. He paid a lot for the big box.
Okay, so do any idea what some of our, let's call 10 years ago? When did that game come out? 10 years ago? You said it was, okay. So let's talk 10 years ago.
I think the big box is probably a little less than 10, but it was close still.
Okay. What are we talking price-wise at that point?
I mean, I would say like about 10 years ago, I mean, there wasn't a lot of modern board games, on the market. I think we're really in the heyday of modern board gaming, probably since like 2017, 2018, and then going through COVID, especially with Kickstarter. I know Chris might have said, when did Alien Frontiers come out on Kickstarter? I'm not even sure. Did he buy it off Kickstarter?
No.
Okay.
He ended up getting it afterwards, and so he paid out the nose for it. When it wasn't really available, he paid for the Kickstarter version.
Yeah, but I mean, I want to say, back in the day, you can go into a board game store, and I feel like you can get almost any board game that you wanted to for less than $50. And I think today, with the advent of Kickstarter and everything coming out, I mean, a lot of board games are costing, they're starting at like $100 and they're just going up from there.
And is that just because of Kickstarter? Do you think the games that are put on Kickstarter, are those all starting? Those are all starting at some price point. Pete, you're a big Kickstarter person.
Yeah, I started the Kickstarter a while ago, probably back 2019. And I remember one of the first games that I bought, I spent $79 on, and I thought, man, this is just way a lot of money. And then I started going down that rabbit hole. That's kind of the baseline for me going back. Usually when I would buy games, they were in the $40 to $50 range normally.
That's kind of what David was saying, yeah.
Yeah, but now I've spent way more than I should on some of these games. Even the one that we just played that we're going to talk about here. Yeah, I spent a lot of money.
And I don't. I enjoy the bling, but I enjoy it when someone else paid for it. So I like the nice production, but I have, your question, what's my limit? I don't know that I could spend more than $60 on a game, and typically I'm not going to spend maybe $45 would probably be my limit. And maybe that's why I've started to open up to the second-hand market that you would introduce me to, David, because you can still get a decent game for less of a price. And, okay, it's not pristine, but a lot of times it's pretty darn close.
Yeah, and I would say, there's definitely a bunch of games that you cannot, I guess, buy. Like, we talked about Foundations of Rome, for instance. They are coming out. We'll talk about it with a retail version. It's going to be named something different, and we'll kind of bring that out later in the episode. But if you wanted the experience of playing Foundations of Rome, it's starting at $200 upwards, and it goes all the way north of that. Daniela, do you, as a goofy noob, do you have something, I guess that's your price point?
I don't have a price point. I think if I like a game and I've played it, I'm interested in getting it. But I think if walking into a game store, I'm really buying still very new. I don't really expand. I probably have more puzzles than I have games, just because when I do go, if I go to half price books, that's really where I'm looking for things that we've played before. So I'm generally not going to buy a brand new game on Kickstarter or anything like that. It's going to be because we've played a game and I've enjoyed it. So for me, the investment is, can I play this? Can I teach it? And can I enjoy having it around? So,
but here's an interesting thing for me. So board games are entertainment. Right? And you buy a board game, you can play it as much as you want. And if you enjoy it, you're going to get a lot of play out of it. You go to the movies, for example, that's like $16, $20 per person. And when it's over, right? So you go and you get 2 hours of entertainment and you're done. You buy a board game. I just got done saying I wouldn't pay over $45 for it. But even if you pay $100 for it, compare it to a movie, you play it 5 times, you got your money's worth from an entertainment value.
Yeah, the BG app's nice because you can put in the amount that you pay for the game and it'll break down the cost per player, per game you played. So that's really nice. And it does kind of give you an idea of what your investment is and what that return on investment is. And, you know, how many times you're playing it with how many people. It's really an interesting statistic.
So I'm interested to know, David, as a collector, where are you going? Where's your wife saying, David, absolutely not. You're not buying that for that.
Well, I hope she's not listening to this episode, but you know, normally I don't necessarily have a limit.
Okay.
You know, if there's something that's really rare out there that I come across, if I feel the price is justified and I think it's going to go up over time because I don't think it's going to come back in a print or something like that, I'll jump on it, but it has to be a certain type of game.
Okay.
I think like nowadays what I'm really looking at is, because I think there's so many people that are chasing that rabbit down that rabbit hole and going on Kickstarter and spending lots and lots of money to get a game that might not be great, or maybe it turns out it's not one of their games that fits their wheelhouse, even though it might be really good. So my new strategy is a lot of times I'll just wait till kind of that hype dies about a year later, because there's always something new coming out. And if that game stands the test of time, you know, you can normally go back in there and buy it from somebody who it just wasn't their flavor, and you can get it at a pretty good rate. I mean, there's sometimes where you're going to miss out on that. I think that what leads to FOMO, but for the most part, I think that you're better off doing that, especially like if you are buying on the secondhand market. You know, there's really big conventions like Origins or Gen Con or PAX, and if you go on to the secondary market, like even right now, Gen Con's coming up, and there's a ton of people that are shedding a bunch of good stuff because they need to clear room for the new stuff. So, you know, a lot of times there's only so much space that somebody has that they're allocating for a game room. And so once they hit that limit, normally they don't go beyond that. I think me and Pete are maybe more on the extreme where I'll just build another room into my house or something and just keep building out my library. But that's, I think, on the more rare occasion.
You can always just wait for the super mega version to come out that all the companies seem to be doing now. They just do the next super bling version and you just buy it as people are trying to get rid of it.
I just know that there's a black market for board games. I mean, it's fascinating, honestly.
Yeah. But I do think the price is, you know, it's kind of getting really high. I mean, if you look at it to video games, for instance, you could buy like a one console and stuff like that, and you're buying one board game, deluxified edition for like $400 when you can go out there and maybe if you're into video games or something like that, get something comparable.
The hard thing now, I think, is that there's so many games coming out by great publishers and artists and all that kind of stuff with great themes, and it's hard to not have that FOMO because you want to play them all, and the amount of games, honestly, that come out, it blows my mind.
That's why what you do is you go to a protospiel and you meet David and you just play all the stuff that he buys because he can't help it.
Good plan. You should try that, Chris.
Yeah, I think that will. What's the most you've ever spent on a game? Do you know?
I think, to my knowledge, I bought Glory to Rome for $350, black box edition, but I feel like that is a pretty good investment.
Yeah, I'm up around $180, I think, for one game in particular.
What is it? Do you know?
The 1.2 version of Dwellings of Elder Vale. I'm trying to think of what it is off the top of my head, but that's one of the ones that Kickstarter is going to be coming around at the end of the year. So I'm excited to play it. But again, when I look at that game, I see that there's going to be a lot of value in it for me. I watch the playthroughs, so I really kind of get a good idea of what that's going to be like for me and that I'm going to enjoy it. One of the other things, Chris, you kind of mentioned on is when some of these Kickstarters come out and they have all the upgrades, all the expansions to it, there's a lot of money there. But if you go and actually buy a small version, play it once or twice, see if you're going to like it before you do that. That's one of the things that I do often.
Chris, how about you? What's the top dollar you've spent?
I was sitting there thinking that I haven't spent anywhere near $100 on any single game except Crokinole, and that'd be my exception. I spent $300 some bucks to get myself a Crokinole board and every accessory I could find. But other than that, I doubt I've spent more than $70 on a single game. Probably closer to 60. I'm cheap.
I spent $25 on trekking the national parks, and it was $50 originally. So I found that half price. So
I'll spend $50 on coins. So,
yeah. The Deluxifier over here. Awesome. All right. Thanks, David. That was a great topic. So those are our opinions on high price games. I am so interested to know, anybody out there, what's the most you've paid for a game and what was that game? Definitely interested in that. Let us know by sending us an email at thefifthmeatball@gmail.com. We'd love to have you guys follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or on our BGG, or check out our website at thefifthmeatball.com. And before you forget, why not take a second, hit the subscribe button so you never miss one of our shows. And if you want to help us grow, one of the best ways to do that is to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you do, we will read it on a future show. As always, thank you guys all so much for listening. And here we go. Well, I can hear the king bellowing his orders again. Let's go gather our materials so we can get started on the castles of Mad King Ludwig.
Castles of Mad King Ludwig is a tile-laying and set collection game where you and other contractors work to construct castles subject to the whims of the Mad King himself. The standard game plays 1 to 4 players but increases to 5 players with expansions. Each round, the master builder draws room tiles and arranges them for sale, setting their prices between 1,000 and 15,000 marks. Players then take turns buying one of the rooms and placing them into their castles, paying the cost to the master builder. The master builder goes last and can also buy a room, paying the cost to the bank. The next player in turn order then becomes a master builder, and the process is repeated until the room card deck is depleted. There are 8 different types of rooms: activity rooms, corridors, downstairs rooms, food rooms, living rooms, outdoor rooms, sleeping rooms, and utility rooms. Each has a number of entrances along its walls, at least one of which must align with that of another room when placed into your castle. If you successfully connect all of a room's entrances to other rooms, you earn a completion bonus based on the type of the room completed. Points are earned each time you place a room, as well as for adjacency bonuses specific to each room. You also earn points by completing activity rooms, from bonus cards providing personal goals, from shared goals, from rooms whose available tiles were fully depleted, and from leftover money. The player with the most points at the end of the game wins the Crazy King's gratitude and the game. Castles of Mad King Ludwig was designed by Ted Alspach and was first published in 2014 by Bezier Games. We played using the Blinged Out Collector's Edition that was released in 2022.
All right, thanks, Chris. So, guys, Castles of Mad King Ludwig, what is it about the collector's edition that makes you want to lower the drawbridge and rush right in? And what were some of the moments that you really enjoyed while playing this game?
The one thing I really like about the game is the table presence that you have. When you're playing, you set it up on the board. There are a lot of nice looking components on it. The version that I have has the actual castles, which allows the 5-player variant of that game. And that really is just enjoyable for me. The tiles are big. They have a version that's even bigger than the tiles that we have.
The colossal version?
The colossal version. And the only reason I didn't get that was I was really concerned about the space that I was going to have on the table. We played just around here, and we had room. Your table, David, here is a fairly good size, but we were still a little cramped on it, I would say, because your castle's going to sprawl out a little bit. But just the components are really great. That's one of the things that I like about it. And the other really nice thing about the game is the trays that come with the game. I really enjoy when there's a good storage solution, and that solution includes easy setup and easy gameplay getting prepped for.
Yeah, I just bought the regular version. So we played with the collector's edition. I went on Amazon and just bought the regular version, actually at a pretty good price at the moment, and it had those trays in it too. And I spent $40 on it, normally 60. I spent 40. All the components were real nice in the trays, and it said, hey, if you don't have the expansions, keep this foam in there, and it fills up the box. When you get the expansions, take the foam out, put those trays in. Really, really well done. Well produced.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because as you're playing, you don't need really the center board. That's just for scoring. And as you're going around, it's got these great little geese that move around with it, or swans, whatever they are. Not geese. We don't like geese. No, they got great little swans that move around, and it kind of holds all the components, but you're building out your tile placement right in front of you. And so it's kind of like we all have our individual boards in front of us that we're building out, and we're kind of piecing them together. You do need space for this game, definitely.
Yeah.
But it does, like as everybody's been saying, the layout of the game, the tiles, the pieces, the castles, the tokens, they remind me of those pogs we had back in the day. Great presentation for those, for sure.
My biggest thing I like about this game is that it's pretty simple to teach. There's kind of one main action when you're the master builder that you have to do something different, but other than that, you're looking at the tiles and just selecting one that you kind of want to build. I think there's 8 tiles, different types of tiles in the game, but the little cheat sheet that at least we had, the player aid, I thought was pretty good for this game as far as that goes. I like that the actions are fairly straightforward. It's more like puzzling on your own once you get that piece.
Yeah.
But
Definitely after 3 plays, I think I understand some more of the iconography a lot better. First playing this game, I think it was by luck. There was no other reason for me to win the first game I played of this, but it was really interesting to see how the points shook out at the end. So that was really interesting.
I think once that clicks for you, again, your mind clicks on it, and then it's okay. Now I get it, but it takes a little bit of time to understand how am I supposed to score this room.
Correct. And then you've played online, Chris. Online, does it score for you?
I have the app for it, yes, and it does all the scoring for you. It won't let you put things where they can't be.
Okay.
It's actually a really well done app. I think there's 1 or 2 tiles that I'm not convinced yet that they're scoring correctly.
Okay.
But for the most part, I mean, shoot, I got that app. I probably played 20 times, 30 times on the app alone.
That's cool.
I really like the auction mechanic in the game. It's very interesting because, as David said, one person's a master builder, and you're sorting those tiles out. And there's some strategy that goes along. You're kind of looking at everybody else's board. I know, Chris, you kind of set me up pretty good. I'll tell you how much money I have, and you really want to benefit from it and try to soak every coin you can out of me. But it's a really great mechanic. I think it works well for the game.
It's an interesting balance because you don't want the person to get a really, really good tile, but you want them to buy something because the money's coming to you.
Right.
So you got to, I love that part of the game, just figuring out how do I want to set these tiles up. And sometimes you got to give somebody something.
Yeah. That's how I think I earn a lot of my money. The first game and the second and this third game that we played, I think I set those up because I'm like, I know what some of these other people are going for with their endpoints. And even if they're kind of like squeaking out in front of me, I don't need those tiles. So they have a ton of coins on them. Every time you pass and you repopulate the tiles in front of you, you're putting coins on the ones that were unused. So some of them in this last game, we had 3, 4, 5 extra $1,000 coins on them. And I was kind of placing those in places where I knew people were going to get them, but I had tons of money the entire game this last time.
And you still lost.
No.
The other thing I like about the game, too, is as you're building your castle up, it's very enjoyable. At the end of the game, whether I win or lose, I really felt like I did something. I had fun doing it, which is an important part of playing a game for me. Not just, figuring out that puzzle, but when I look down at the game afterwards, I'm like, yeah, it turned out kind of the way that I had planned it, which is really nice.
Yeah, I played a lot multi-handed since just solo multi-handed since I bought it. And I agree. Every time I finish, there's typically one, if not more, of my castles that I've built doing that you look at, it's like, that's pretty cool. Or this one looks different than any other ones that I've built out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely nice.
Overall, for me, I really enjoy the other components of this game that offer you your own personal rewards. Sure, there's a couple of the King's favors that are laid out there, and you can kind of tell as the game and the rounds are going on what everybody's kind of looking for, but you have these special bonus cards in your hand, and you can get more as you're working through them. Those ended up being fun at the end to tally those up. You also have royal decrees in the beginning that we start with, and some of those, the royal decrees we showed everybody else sitting around the table, and some of those were just an enhanced benefit to you. I know one game we played, I was allowed to cover up all my money. This last one, I got a ton of points if I didn't have any corridors or any hallways in my building. So I thought there's a lot of really cool personal components that nobody else knows what you're really doing that really makes this game interesting. The second game I played this, I got absolutely blitzed trying to do every single one of the King's favors. And you really are learning every time you play this which way you're going to go based on what the tiles that are coming out. So I really, really enjoy this game overall with just the different mechanics that it poses.
Yeah, there's a lot of variability in the game just with the number of tiles that come out. When you're setting up the game, you're going to put out a certain amount per player count, but then you take those cards and you shuffle them up, and you don't know exactly what's going to come up. The last game we were playing, one of my royal decree cards or one of my bonus cards was to have the I got 3 points for every 450 room that came out, and it's halfway through the game, and I know none of them turned over, and I'm just struggling to try to figure out how to get those extra points.
That's where you got to get a blue room.
Yeah,
finish the blue room and take 2 of those out there. What about the detail of the design? To me, as David, you and I have played around with design, and just the way those entrance ways on each room has anywhere from 1 to, I think some of them might have 5 or 6 entrances on them, maybe even more for the corridors. But those are set up and designed very specifically. And this is another thing that the app has helped me see when the computer is playing and that computer AI is going to put a corridor down in a room that is arranged just perfectly so that all of these entrances come together, and you start to see, wow, there's a lot more to this game that I'm not even doing. The way they're putting those pieces down, I thought that was really well done, and obviously, to me at least, play tested really, really well.
Yeah, I do know the version that I have. Even though the tiles are round, they do have a little flat side right where the hallways are, so they line up really well, so you don't have that little gaps. I know some of the older games, they didn't have that, and it was a little bit more, not as precise. But I totally agree with you. When you line up rooms, you know if they're going to fit or they're not. There's not like just a little bit of overhang there. It's going to be perfect, and it's going to line up. So, yeah, that they really did a great job on that design and the layout of those tiles.
Yeah, I mean, I think the theme really shines through in this game, just based off of something in history with this Mad King that actually built kind of crazy castles. And then I think he was deposed of because he just built weird stuff. And people were like, you're wasting all our money building these castles. And I think that theme really definitely comes through in this game, especially as you're looking around the room and seeing,
how do I fit this?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's like,
Some of the
you
names
feel a
of
little
the
mad
rooms.
yourself.
Some of the names of the rooms are pretty funny too. I mean, there's the bottomless pit, the mold room, and there's some the cheese. There's just some really crazy stuff. Like, okay, that guy's nuts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that actually interesting. I don't think I made that correlation as you're playing it, David, that when we're playing it, all these rooms, you're like kind of looking at it going like a mad scientist yourself, like city planner laying it
and all
out.
the requirements too. There's, I don't want this room next to this type of room and all this kind of crazy stuff. And I agree. The theme, if you pay attention to what's going on, like, this is a crazy guy designing his castle. You guys think there's you got to do this to win, or do you think there's multiple ways to win it?
I've seen lots of strategies that work well. I don't have any clue on any solid strategy. I think what you do is, Daniela, as you said, you have to pick a few things and go with it and really lean into it hard to score well. I think if you just try to do a little bit of everything, I don't think you're going to score as well, because you really want those bonuses to pile on top of each other. Some of those tiles have a bonus when you connect to a room, but some of those also have a bonus no matter where you build it in the castle. I know that's what I did on the last game.
Yeah, the downstairs rooms are like that.
Yeah, it really helped out on my scoring, and I didn't win, but I didn't come in second either, but it was fun doing it. In the game, I was way out in the lead, and I knew I wasn't going to score a lot of points on my end bonuses, so I just tried to push as hard as I could. And again, it all come up. Daniela, you got me by what, 1 point, and Chris, I still think it was a close game. I don't know that there's one good strategy. And again, with all the random setups, you just don't know exactly what's going to come out.
Yeah.
The one game we played, there were bonuses on basement tiles, and I think 4 of them came out in the whole game.
Right. And so there's that luck too. I know David, one of his games, he played with a lot of the small tiles, those little 100 pieces that were 5 every time he played them, and he racked up so many points. I think he ended up winning that second game when we had played, and I saw him doing a little bit of that this time, but there were also points for small rooms on this track this time with the King's Favors.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that worked for him the second time. So I was watching David, definitely seeing how he was playing, seeing if I think you can maybe play it a few different times the way you think you maybe won the last time. I'm not saying David did this at all, but definitely pick a couple things, go for it, and go for it hard. And really, you got to manage your money too, because there's going to be some things that come out that people put way at the end that you need, and it may be that one tile that's going to help you get your favor or your bonus card, and you really need to make sure you plan the money right. You can't just have people buying stairs off you.
Yeah,
you're never gonna.
Yeah, I like that interaction with each other though too, because you feel, even when you're not actively building, you're looking around, you're looking at what tiles out there. So even though the game takes an hour and a half or so, I'm doing something all that time. There's no downtime for me. At least it didn't feel like it.
All right, guys. So what about Castles of Mad King Ludwig that makes you want to throw it into the bottomless pit? What are maybe some things that just frustrated you, even as you start to learn the game? Maybe they work themselves out, but what are some of the things that you had to get over? Chris?
Well, for me, the first time I played this game, I was like, "What in the heck is going on?" But I think I didn't quite understand that some of the rooms score wherever they are. Some of the rooms score if you're connected through the doorway. Some of them, the activity rooms, you lose points, but it's not through an entrance. It's any way something's touching it. And that was a lot to wrap my head around without studying it ahead of time enough, I think. But once that clicked, like I said, and I think really once I realized, okay, all these rooms are purple, all these rooms are red, and then I got into my head what each one does, then you can play it really, really fast, really, really fast. But there was a little bit of a hump to get over with. Okay, how does all these things come together?
Yeah, I think one of the things you're touching on is the walls. The walls in some of those activity rooms confused us heavily the first game or so that we played, because it was subtracting points, and then you got to look at your actual tile, and there's a couple different icons on them. You got to make sure you're looking at the right one to score, to make sure, oh, I put the swan down, or I put the activity room down, or I put a sleeper down, to make sure that's what the actual room is, and it's not just, oh, you're gaining points if it's next to a sleeper room. It's a little heavy, but honestly, the tiles are beautiful. The art is beautiful on it. So as long as you understand where those are on the tiles, I think a couple plays and you're good.
Yeah, for me, from like a gameplay standpoint on this game, I think that you should play with a lot of players that are about the same skill level. It could tend to, I think, run away if you have maybe one new person sitting at the table and 3 experienced players sitting at a table, because that new person's not going to necessarily know how to price things at the auction. So the benefit to the player on their left is really powerful, I think, in this game, if they don't know how the bidding actually, or the auction actually works. And I think that could be an issue when you play just at different skill sets. I think there is an advantage in this game sometimes by sitting next to the new player and being on the left of them versus other games.
The only other thing I would say is the game ending points, the King's favors, can really make or break your points. I think it's important to keep that in mind. Like I said, I just didn't get the cards that I needed. You know, the cards that I started with really didn't pan out for me. And yeah, I probably, as you said, could have got more cards and, try to fish. Daniela, you had 5 or what did you have? 7 cards out. And, those are extra bonus points to score. So I don't know that it is a total make or break, but it really does affect the scoring in the game.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about, or I guess 2 things I learned about the King's favors, or maybe one I'm still trying to decide on. Number one, if you're not scoring well on one of them, and maybe you're going to take 4th place or 3rd place, let it go, right? Don't sit there and say, oh, I got to take this tile because I got to get in the scoring. If it's only going to get you 3rd place and it's 2 points, and you can get 6 points some other way, let it go, right? And don't get sucked into that trap. The other thing that I'm still trying to decide, and I think I don't want to pair them up, but your King's favors may be, hey, you're going to score based on how many purple rooms there are. And then you get a bonus card that's, you get 3 points for every purple room, and you think that's a good thing, but it may not be a good thing because everybody else is trying to get those purple rooms too. And do you want them paired up or not? And I'm thinking now you probably don't.
No. I did that with the basement rooms. I didn't go for any of those this time, and I saw you guys fighting over some of that stuff, and I was like, let it go. Yeah, exactly what you're saying, because you're not going to get certain points. What's 2 points versus being in last place versus 1?
It can be a trap.
Yeah. The last thing I would say, and this isn't a reason to throw the game away, is the setup does take a little bit to do versus some of the other games. Even though it's laid out very nice when you're taking the tiles out of their stored locations and putting them into the actual game trays that you're going to play, there is some setup, and we're real fortunate that everybody pitches in and helps out. But that's just one little, I would even just call it a nitpick, that if you're going to play the game and try to get it set up ahead of time, there is some prep to it.
What about, so I'm a math guy, and so I kind of like it, but some of the bonuses are based on square footage. So who has the most square footage and who has the second most square footage of certain types of rooms? I'm just curious of other people's opinions on that. Because again, I like math, any opportunity I get to do it, but it can kind of slow things down when you're doing that scoring. You're like, oh, I don't know, what's 325 plus 75 plus this plus that? It's just weird.
Yeah, the end game scoring does take a little bit of time to go through. I know we went through and did it all, and with 4 of us, and I can, if you had 5, it's even harder. But you're trying to figure out not only the square footage, but how many of the rooms do you have, and then you got the bonuses if the tiles have all been used up. And there's just a lot of scoring, but I think it all balances out in the end.
I was actually surprised at how well it balanced out at the end of the game, for sure, because I thought we all came fairly close, and even in one of the second games we played, it was all neck and neck too.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I could say is I know this is like a lot of games, there's a lot of chance with the tiles that get shuffled in because you're not seeing you're maybe seeing half of them. And if that, not every single square footage, like the 350 rooms or the 250. I think this last game we only had one 250 room show up on the map.
Yeah.
And to me, I just wish there was a little bit more agency. Maybe there's a card in there or something, and maybe we haven't seen it yet, but we're. You do something and you could just pick one.
Pick whatever.
Because a lot of times those room keys, like if it's a 250 room, there's going to be 3 things that it could be a component on. And I think one of them was basement on this last game, and we didn't really see any of those. So it kind of stalled out where, you just don't know what's in that large deck. So, I'm just looking for a little bit more agency in some of the games I play. This one, sometimes I feel a little constricted because the game's going to play the way it's going to come up randomly, but sometimes you could be going down a path or a couple paths, and it just, by mid-game or end-game, you just know that you're not going to get it because you were hoping other things would come out, and they just never flipped over for you. I mean, there's a little bit of agency, but not as much as I would prefer.
Yeah, I think the way the game handles that is either with the blue rooms, where, again, you can just take two off of a stack or look through the stack and get the ones you want. And the other way is, hey, if your bonus cards aren't working out, build a utility room, get another utility card, and do that early. So that you can actually work towards it rather than just hoping you get one that works for you. But I agree, you're kind of at the whim of what comes up.
Yep.
And it may not even be in that deck because not every card is in that deck, not every tile is going to be in that deck, and sometimes your deck just doesn't work.
Cool.
The last little thing I have is just a nitpick, and that's the downstairs rooms. Their entrances for me are really hard to see, and for me to be able to tell, is that a 1 entrance room, a 2 entrance room, and where is that? I'm old. The black on black for me is just really hard to see.
No, I agree with you. I think if the the entryways were maybe highlighted a little bit.
It can be a torch or something next to the doors or something
exactly,
like that. Thematic.
All right, guys, love that. So let's head to the collector's corner. Does Castles of Mad King Ludwig fill the royal coffers, David?
Yeah, so we're going to kind of do this a couple different ways here. So we played the collector's edition, and right now the collector's edition on BGG, you can find it actually new for anywhere between like 160 to 250, new or used. There's a wide range there, especially like I compared BGG and eBay together. And so it was anywhere between 160 and 250 is what you can get the game on. But sometimes as a collector, I like to go to the source. So if you actually go to Bezier's website, they actually sell the collector's edition brand new for $199. So sometimes you get a better deal there because shipping's included in that price and they're just shipping it to you for $200 versus trying to piecemeal all these things together and then having to pay shipping on top of that. So for the edition that we played, sometimes it pays to go to the actual website of the publisher because some of them you can actually find a better price than even on the used market. So that's a tip for people. But also, like Chris was saying, you can just go buy the regular version of this. Right now, Amazon's running a great sale. It's $39.97, so that's kind of where it's at. And I think for the regular edition, I looked at the used market, it was going somewhere between $25 and $30. So you don't have to play the collector's edition. It is a lot nicer, but
and it has all the expansions in it. So the $39.97 is for the base game. I think it's normally $60. It's on sale for $40. But then if you want all the expansions, it's another $47 or something like that. So if you do want all the content, you're still paying $100, even if you don't get all the fancy stuff.
Yeah, I feel pretty good paying $129 for the Kickstarter.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That was a good purchase.
I still wouldn't do it, but it's pretty good.
All right, guys, before we drop the portcullis on this discussion, any final thoughts? And I'm going to kick it over to David since we just talked about the collector's corner. David, is this a game that you would put in your collection?
This is a game that I won't have in my collection just because I know Pete and he already owns it. But I do think it's a game that will definitely hold its value. I think that the collector's edition, just kind of like Pete was saying, he bought it for $129. You can't get it for that price, even kind of new or used now. It's gone up over time. So I do think this game is going to continue to go up. It's a good buy if you got it for that price.
All right, awesome. Pete, as the Deluxeifier, any items in this game, you got the collector's edition, anything that you're looking to upgrade with your current set?
I really can't think of anything that this thing needs. It came with everything. The only thing I would add, again, you could put sleeves on the cards, but I didn't even do that because we're really not doing a deck building. You're not shuffling through or going through them a lot. So it's really not going to damage the cards too much. But this version is beautiful. I have no upgrades that I would do. Chris, maybe you get some coins. That's always a good
the
thing.
coins are nice.
Yeah, they are.
Motorized swans, maybe.
Yeah, with a little magnet under it that you can
just
move.
tell it go 6.
Well,
and
you
it
know
goes
what?
up 6.
Those swans are weighted, though,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you look at it, so they're not tipping over.
Right.
So, I mean, they really did a fantastic job
I agree.
in the production value. We really didn't get into that, but this is really...
If you
a
can't
good
find
one.
your color that you want to play
Yeah,
in that
there-
game, there's 20 different color swans. If you can't find your color, you're pickier than I am.
David and I both asked, like, wait, how many people can play this game? Because we saw all the like player pieces, and it's
Exactly.
just an amazing option. Chris, as the intellectual introvert, how do you feel this game interacts with others and those around you as somebody who tends to be a little more introverted?
Yeah, I think you can play this game without getting outside of your comfort zone. You have to have a little bit of interaction, but there's not a lot of direct interaction. But also, as from the intellectual side, I think it's a pretty cool puzzle putting together that initial pricing piece along with building your own castle. There's a couple of different puzzles that you have to solve simultaneously, and I really enjoyed it. I went out and bought it. I finally caught up. I'm on the 7th one. This was the 7th thing I bought.
There you go.
So
Awesome.
I enjoyed it.
Okay. Well, and as for myself, as the goofy noob, for people who are new in the gaming world, this game, is this something that I'm going to recommend that you play? I would say no right off the bat. This is not a game I would recommend somebody new dive into. There's a little bit more of the mechanics. You need to understand cards. You need to understand iconography. To David's point earlier, I agree with what he said, and you need to play this game probably with like balanced people who have kind of some of the same skill level set, maybe in a little different array of skills, but I would say maybe wait a couple months, get a couple more tile placing games under your belt, and it's going to take a little bit to get the gist of this one. So that's my whole view on that one. Well, guys, it looks like they're adding gators in the moat. It's probably a good time to end this discussion, but we'll be back after a short break to start building the foundations of Rome.
Foundations of Rome is a Dutch auction tile-laying game where players honor Romulus by plotting and building spacious homes, bustling marketplaces, and glorious monuments in the Eternal City. The standard game plays 1 to 4 players but increases to 5 players with expansions. The game takes place on a central board divided into square plots representing Rome. 6 plots are available for purchase from a market, with prices ranging from 1 to 10 coins. Players can use their turn to purchase one of these plots, paying the price and claiming the plot for future development. The cards in the market then slide to cheaper prices, with a new plot becoming available for purchase. Rather than purchase a plot, you can choose instead to earn income or to build a building on the plots you already own. Building is free, but you must own plots oriented to accept the exact shape of the building you construct. Buildings range in size from 1 to 4 plots and provide various benefits to their constructor based on their type and, in many cases, what other types of buildings are adjacent to them. The game is divided into 3 eras. At the end of each era, players earn money from their commercial buildings and points from the various types of civic buildings based on adjacency, and also points based on their relative population, which comes from their residential buildings. At the end of the 3rd era, the player with the most points is appointed Grand Architect by Romulus, and their name is heralded throughout the illustrious history of Rome. Foundations of Rome was designed by Emerson Matsuuchi and was published in 2022 by Arcane Wonders.
All right, well, here we are in the 8th century BC, helping Romulus establish the foundations of Rome. So, guys, what is it about this game that really puts the mortar on your bricks?
The one obvious thing, I'll throw it out there, but certainly the Deluxeifier over there probably loves this game every time it comes out. Those pieces, the buildings that are really just miniature sculptures, each and every one of them, that's as overboard as it gets with respect to blinging out a game right out of the box. And it's an amazing table presence once that board gets filled.
Yeah, it really is. I do like the table presence of it. The other thing, again, I talked about this earlier, is the trays that as you pull them out, that's your player tray in front of you. Mm-hmm. As you start laying those tiles out there, or the buildings out there, you're uncovering the bonuses that you actually get, which really is helpful in the scoring and figuring out, what your bonuses are going to be. The thing about the game, to me, it is also deceivingly light. You think it's a heavy game. You look at it, there's that presence, but it's a really simple gameplay. You have about 3 actions that you can do. It's real easy to teach new players, and I think it'll draw people in when it's out on a game table and people walk by and they can actually see how easy something like that is to play. So it's a little bit deceiving from my point of view, but I love the table presence. I really do.
And David, you've talked about that before, that you feel that makes it a great gateway game because someone says, oh my gosh, look at that, and then they realize they can actually play it.
Yeah, I was just going to say that when you guys were talking about it, this is a game I definitely like to get out. I don't bring it out because it's really heavy box, but when people come over to my house, I like to get this game out and play with them, especially if they're non-gamers. Maybe they're coming from like Monopoly or Risk, and you're like, hey, let's go play this game. And when they see it in front of them, their trays even, the shock of like, I don't think I'm going to be able to play this game. And then when you kind of explain how the game actually works, and then you see them doing it, it opens up their eyes really to what a modern board game can be. And then when they see all the things they did on the board afterwards, they're like, wow, I can play this game. About halfway through, a lot of times it just clicks on them and they're like, oh, this isn't bad. This is actually quite fun.
Yeah, I think to touch on everything all the guys are saying is the components of this are really well done. You can pick up a building, what the icon is below it, what points you're getting, what money you're getting. Everything is set really beautifully in front of you. And that's one of the reasons I actually like this for, which I'll talk about later, new players, is the top of the deed board tells you at the end of each era what to do. I mean, it's all laid out there in front of you of how to move about this place in this board.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you just basically, when that last card comes down, you just read down the list and you score that round. So it's great.
Yeah, I love games that do that. There's a number of them where you just go down the list and do the things. The instructions are right there on the board. Yeah. Again, very welcoming, very easy to teach, and very easy to follow the gameplay.
Yeah, and even though I think there's quite a bit of strategy, it's not hard strategy, but it's how am I going to play this out, whether it's your population, your civilization, money, what are you going to put out there? I like the fact that the game moves in a way that is constantly moving. By the time you're kind of gone around and you bought a deed or you passed or you got your money coffers back up to speed, you're like, oh no, I got to do something again. So I think the game moves fairly well too. And it didn't take us long to play a number of these rounds once we got going on them.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of potential for analysis paralysis in the third era. But even then, I think maybe it happened to us a couple of times. I did it once where I was apologizing to the table saying, I'm sorry, guys. I know this is a critical point. I got to get this right. But other than that, once or twice during a game, yeah, it's relatively, maybe not straightforward, but you can figure it out relatively quickly what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's some really clever play, especially when you're swapping out your buildings and switching what other people are going to score off of those buildings. You put those little ones down, and those are going to get bonuses for your adjacency, but sometimes those are hard to move around or expand or change. And once you place them out, you're kind of stuck with what's there. I know, David, you messed me up a couple times. You had something out there, and I'm like, boom, I'm going to score a lot with coins or whatever, and then you switch it all to people. So there is that opportunity for, that clever gameplay or, that extra strategy that you might be able to incorporate into the game.
Yeah, one of the games we played, I put out a building that was far too large to put out early. I ended up getting Chris tons of, I think it was money.
Yeah, because you can't do anything with it. If it's too big, you can't replace it. If you have a smaller building, one of the things that I didn't cover in the description is you can always overbuild a smaller building with a building that is bigger than it or that is bigger than a couple of buildings if you wanted to. But if it's too big, it's stuck.
Yeah, and so I placed a building that was too big, and it ended up just feeding him the rest of the game, and I was like pretty salty about that the entire game.
Yeah, I was going to say that's like one of the ways that as you get to learn, there's like a subtle strategy to it. Because if you see somebody, obviously in this game, it's kind of like Monopoly if you're listening and you don't quite know how this game works, but you want properties that are adjacent to each other because it gives you more options. So the more properties that are orthogonally connected normally help you on this. But if you see somebody on the board starting to collect kind of things next to each other, and there's a property space next to it, sometimes I'll just buy that space or try to get it because I know I'm waiting for what Daniela's doing, or I'm waiting for what Chris is going to throw down, and then I'm just going to milk points out of that. So, part of the strategy I think is maybe don't get your big buildings down in the beginning of the game, get them out towards the end of the game so people can't do that to you. But there's a lot of different ways to play it.
There was one game we played where everybody was waiting. We were putting out little small dink buildings and no one could build off of the other game. So it was really interesting.
I think, one of my favorite memories of this game, I think after we had played it a couple times, is that I think there was a round in the first round where we all just kept passing and collecting hordes of money. And it was just pass, 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 because none of the plots we actually liked. And so I think it was at that point where everybody's like, well, I'm just going to keep passing and get money. And for some reason, you could do the same thing in Mad King Ludwig, which we just played. But for some reason in this game, passing actually feels better because I get stuff instantly. I don't know why it feels better, but to me, it feels a little bit better when I pass in this game. I'm actually drawing resources right away to kind of reload and go back into the fight.
Well, the other thing with this one is if a lot of times I might pass because I need money because there's a specific plot I want. I can't afford it yet. But the rough part is I know that it's probably not going to be there when it comes back. Because when people do start buying, as soon as someone buys something, everything gets cheaper. And that might be finally enough to entice somebody. So I think there is a little bit of strategy there of when do I spend my money? When do I go after it? And then that little bite feeling of, dang it, I really needed that. And I think there's some hate drafting that goes on.
Absolutely. Yeah, the money management is important in this. I made sure my money was stacked a couple times because there were a couple plots in between other people's that I know we were all going for some of the same things. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know the second game that I played, I was actually going real hard into money, and I really wasn't building awesome buildings or anything like that. And my mistake was not rushing the end. And what happened at the end, I should have just filled up my tiles and put out as much as I could and just end the game. But when I stopped doing that, you guys just started moving things over and piling on the points. And I think if I would have ended the game like 4 rounds earlier, which I think I could have done, I might have won that game. So there's also some possibilities of, as we talked about, some different strategies that you can go for on the with the game.
Yeah, because I think that feeling of like dread, right? When the auction's getting close and you only have like 3 or 2 cards left and you're looking around the room at everybody and you're asking yourself, am I going to get another go or like 2 more goes? Because there's just a couple buildings I want to put out for points, but odds are Pete's probably buying one, somebody else is buying the other, and I'm only going to get really one more turn in this round. I like that feeling of like, what am I going to choose? Even though it's a simple feeling, but I like it. It's just kind of gut-wrenching. It pulls at me sometimes.
All right, guys, that was awesome. So how about any cracks in the foundation of this game? What are some things that maybe frustrate you or things that just don't make sense, or the overall beautiful game, but is it worth the cost of the money?
Well, the scoring with the population is a little tricky, I would say, because you're scoring on the points of the person ahead of you. So it's kind of like a catch-up mechanic, but to me, it just doesn't seem to hit the spot. It seems very arbitrary for me.
It's an interesting puzzle though. In there, you want to be second for the most part, or you want to be the one that's just below the gap and not the one that's
leading.
Well, leading is okay, but I'm just thinking the way the scoring works is whoever's in first place has the most population. If they've got 20 people, that's too many. If they've got 10 people, they get 10 points plus 4 at the end of the first era, or plus 7 or 10 depending on the era. And the next person in second place will get 10 points because that's what the person ahead of them, their population is. You can be sitting at 2 and you still get 10 points. What you don't want to be is third place sitting there at 1. And so maybe Dave is in first place, he gets 14, I'm in second, and I get 10. And then just because you're 1 behind me, you only get 2 points.
Yeah, it's just like that's a silly little thing to focus on. I agree with you, Pete.
It can be tough because I'm going to jump ahead of you, and then the other guy just jumps right back ahead of you. And I agree. It can be an interesting puzzle, though, to work in there.
Well, I think it affects the player count. And I know you were talking about this earlier, that the different player counts really feel different. I know we played it at 3 and 4 a couple times. The 3 players, we blew through the 2 games really quick. I think I looked at all my times, and a game's 45 minutes. I think the longest games are about 50 minutes, if that.
We played a 5-player game that took forever, but I think that was more of who was around the table.
Right, and then that was before me. Before I played that one, I didn't play that one, but I think the player counts really do affect how the game shakes out.
Well, I think it's not just time, but also I felt like the more players there were, the more interaction there was. And we played that 3-player game that I was part of. There wasn't a whole lot of adjacency going on until maybe towards the end of the second, maybe into the third era. We were maybe avoiding it too much, but there also wasn't as much action going on that board. And that was a very different game to me.
Yeah, I think we were playing it definitely more strategic at that point, especially because you can make bigger blocks. And so everybody was kind of more focused. Instead of hate drafting that game, I feel like people were more focused on actually seeing where we could go with kind of building. Nobody really wanted to start a war. It's kind of like we were all playing nice until somebody was going to do something harmful to us. I do think that one of my complaints about this game, just having played it with a little bit more probably than some of you here, was that the middle plots always tended to be of higher priority because the edge plots weren't as good, or they wasn't as many options to score them. And I think that the expansion that just came out for this game really helps to alleviate that, because it makes the side plots better, because it puts down another scoring mechanism or a bonus that you can get if you score every round on the end plot. So now it's not just like, oh, center plots are, really great because you can normally score from other people, but now there is reason sometimes to go for those end spaces or the ones that are on the outside of the rows, which really helps, I think, this game balance out.
Well, that's one of the things that I had is kind of a negative that I really didn't gel with me, is those bonus cards that you had. You get a couple at the beginning, you pick one, and that's what you run with. And I had one that said, every time I build, as long as I don't build next to anything, I get a point. Well, I got 5 points out of it, and that's it. And I think there were other cards that kind of like a red herring. You're chasing after something that's really not worth it. I probably would have done better for myself if I would have just focused on my game better rather than trying to get that bonus 6 points out of it. I mean, you can score 6 points a whole lot easier another way.
I think overall the game for me lands flat. This is a game that I would say I'm not really asking to play, even though it looks really great on the table. It's kind of fun to, get your deeds and put your buildings out and try and think of the little puzzles within puzzles, as Chris has kind of alluded to. But overall, I don't understand the overproduction of this game for what it is. And I don't know, for me, it just, I don't know. I've played it a number of times. I kind of find it a little bit dry, or I don't know, boring. It's just, I'm like, all right. And it's fast. And don't get me wrong, it's fast. You're not sitting there for an hour and a half playing. We played in 35, 40 minutes, I think, every single game. And so it moves fast. But every time I'm left like, all right, well, we scored it. It is what it is. I don't know. I don't know.
No, I agree with you. I think the production value is awesome. I think that's what draws people in. Again, I think it's a good gateway game, but I don't enjoy playing gateway games unless if I'm trying to bring somebody into the hobby. When we're playing, I want to play something that gives me some really strategy. And I think this gives you a little bit, but I agree with it, Daniela. I don't, it doesn't do a whole lot for me when it comes to the actual gameplay. Yeah, there's some clever plays that you can do, but that's about it. I mean, you're putting out plots and you're building buildings, and at the end, even then, comparing it to a little bit with Castle of Mad King Ludwig, I at least when I play that game, I felt like I did something where, at the end of this game, there's, the whole board's filled up, and yeah, it looks kind of cool, but it falls flat for me too.
It's a little battleshipy to me, I guess.
Yeah, I do enjoy gateway games. I like going to a lighter side every once in a while. I don't know that I would spend, we're going to find out how much it is. It's several $100s, maybe $270, $300, maybe even $400. I don't know. It doesn't matter because I would never spend it on that. I do enjoy playing it, but I enjoy playing someone else's copy of it, which is always David's. Do you guys remember when we put this together? Pete, you weren't playing with us yet, but when we first brought this out,
broke my fingers.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a huge amount of construction, but every one of those buildings needed a plastic piece put on it to show what type of building it was and what color player it was. Yeah. And getting some of those in was just brutal.
I was using my teeth at some point to try and pull them off.
Right, and for all of the production values, like now I gotta spend however long it was that we spent. It was like, okay, I'm done. I didn't want to play it at this point. My fingers hurt too much.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take Foundations of Rome into the collector's corner. David, does Foundations of Rome please the Emperor, or does he get stabbed in the back?
So right now you can find this used on BGG and eBay anywhere between like $225 and $250. If you're going to go to Amazon and you're trying to buy this new, it's ranging around $300. But again, if you use my tricks and you go to Arcane Wonder site, you can buy a copy there for around $220. The nice Sundrop Maximus editions. We played the Sundrop edition, so we were playing the highest tier you can play. But I will say this about the game. It just recently, I think within the last 4 months, it got reprinted. And so there was a huge demand before. So the market actually has fallen on this game a little bit because they reprinted the game, and there's a lot more copies in circulation now because people were actually demanding it. So I want to say before like 4 months ago, this game would have been closer to like $400 or $500.
Jeez.
So now the game has gone a little bit down in value just because there's more copies on the market. And if you go to a game store, you could probably find this if it's a hobby game store, because the price point is still going to be, in the upper 200s. Something that they're actually introducing is a smaller series, like a retail version of this, called Foundations of Metropolis. And according to Arcane Wonder's website right now, it's going to retail for $49.99. So I don't know if that's the price point you're going to be able to find it at your local game store. But it's going to be a cardboard version, so you're not going to get all the nice stuff. But it's supposed to be mechanically very similar, if not exactly the same, just reskinned, of what Foundations of Rome currently is. And I think the release date is actually at Gen Con. So if you're listening to this episode, I know they're having a big party there. I was reading online that they're doing a launch party there. So I'm pretty sure that, if you want to try to get this new edition, I think it will be one of the hot ones that are moving there, and it'll probably sell out in my,
Interesting.
from what I see online.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see how that plays out and how it's kind of put in the box, considering what we have with this version of it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, guys. Let's move to final thoughts before we insert the keystone on Foundations of Rome. David, as the collector, you have this in your collection. Are you getting any other upgrades? Are you getting the base kit? You happy with what you have?
Yeah, so to me, I'm definitely happy with what I have. I don't see it leaving my collection anytime soon. I think it plays a good role in what I want it for, which is to introduce people that don't think they could play modern board games into that genre. And it would just be interesting to see what Foundations of Metropolis actually brings to the table. But if you have this version, I don't know why I would step down and buy that version. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Pete, as the Deluxeifier, I don't believe you own this game, correct?
I do not.
All right. So, and it's pretty Deluxeified as it is.
Yes, it is.
Anything in it that you would say needs to be a little better?
No, again, comparing the two games that we were talking about today, these are really the top tier games with their components, their trays that they have. The setup is really top notch. For me, though, it always comes down to the gameplay for me on whether I really want to continue to play something. Again, if I'm trying to introduce this to somebody or we're having a game night, a church night or something like that, I think I would even pass on playing it unless if I was the only one being around to teach. We'll just have David teach it and, I'll play something else. But, I mean, the production value is really nearly off the charts, but the gameplay just falls a little flat for me.
I envision, though, Pete, you're going to go out and buy Foundations of Metropolis and then spend like $200 on the upgraded pieces.
No,
just to get that.
No, and actually I won't, because, like I said, the gameplay for me on that, I really didn't spoil it a little bit here, but it really doesn't do a whole lot for me. So again, I don't mind blinging out a game that I really enjoy if I'm going to play it and really elevate it up. I think the components bring it up to an elevation for me to play it, but not play it continuously.
Chris says, the intellectual introvert. This game moves a little fast. There's a little interaction, but everybody's kind of doing their own puzzle. How do you feel this overall plays out for you?
I mentioned that I enjoy playing a gateway game every once in a while. I think I'd probably choose other gateway games if I had my pick of whatever. Actually, the more we played this, though, when we played this the first time, I was like, I never need to play that again. When we went back and started playing it more, I enjoyed it more. I still wouldn't pay what you have to pay for it. But if David gets out the game and says, hey, we're going to play this today, I'll jump in there and play it. But I don't think it's going to ever make anywhere near my top 10. It's just, there's not enough in there. Now, the other thing, though, that I haven't got to play a lot of the expansions. And so we haven't talked a lot about the expansions because I think you guys maybe touched on one or two. I do hear that, hey, you start to put the expansions in, that's where it really shines. I kind of feel like for $200 bucks, you shouldn't have to whip out the expansions in order for it to shine.
Yeah, good point.
But yeah, David, if you had it on the table, I'd stack some buildings up.
All right, and I think as the goofy noob, for new players playing this game, the weight isn't that heavy on this. It's 1.9 on BGG, and you've heard the guys call it a gateway game a few times. I think it's simple enough if you want to go play this game to put buildings out, buy your deeds, and maybe start with, I would say, 70% of understanding this game you can get. The population is a little tricky. Maybe brush up on just that. Ask some people that you're playing with maybe to explain that, as kind of Chris explained it here today. understand that a little bit, but I do think it's probably simple enough to take in place, but you're going to have a little probably trouble with the money, the population, and knowing what buildings to put out. So it's a little hard for me to say if you're good at tile placing, if you're good at these kinds of games and strategy, you can probably give it a go. But overall, I'm probably not going to recommend this 100% for new players. So maybe watch a game. And I would also say if you're going to play this, try and play it at 4 or 5. I wouldn't come into this game new playing this with just 3 people. So if you can jump in on a game, that would be awesome if you like these kinds of games. Otherwise, you might just want to take a seat and watch. Well, I see the Emperor has arrived, so let's head over to the Coliseum for today's Battle of the Funnest.
All right, everyone, the moment of truth has arrived. It's time to separate the men from the boys, or more appropriately, the games from the toys. We're pitting these games head-to-head against each other in the ultimate face-off. In one corner, weighing in at 2.5 out of 5 with an overall BGG rating of 7.5, crafting crazy corridors and raucous rooms beginning in the bowels of Bavaria, rising onto the scene like the Linderhof Tower, soaring over the competition like a sweet, swift swan, the master of moats, the premier palace producer, the king's favorite by royal decree, Castles of Mad King Ludwig. In the other corner, weighing in at 1.96 out of 5 with an overall BGG rating of 8.1, founded in 753 BC by the radiant Roman Romulus and rising through the ranks to command the console, the nitty-gritty of the Eternal City, the apple of Artemis's eye, a real Caesar pleaser, Matsuchi's monumental miniature masterpiece, Foundations of Rome. And now let's find out which one takes it to the extreme in our Battle of the Funnest showdown. All right, guys, you know how this works. We're going to evaluate these games head-to-head in 5 different categories: theme and production, mechanisms, value for your time, replayability, and the fun factor. We'll each choose which game we think outdoes the other in each category. The game that gets the most votes wins the category, and the game that wins the most categories takes the prize in our Battle of the Funnest. So let's get to it, starting with theme and production. David.
Yeah, for me, this one's going to be a little challenging, but I'm still going to go with Foundations of Rome on this one. I think that the theme and production are over the top, but I think that's a good thing when we're just comparing these two heavyweights and they're trying to both do the same thing with going over the top and kind of deluxifying and kind of going all out on their production. And so for that reason, I still think Foundations of Rome does it a little bit better. So I'm going to go there just with how ease of setup to me takes that on that one. I'm going to kick it off over to Daniela.
I'm actually going to agree with David on this. I am always going to be thoroughly enjoyed having a player board in front of me that fits all the pieces. Everything is really laid out nicely. Castles of Mad King Ludwig, I actually had to understand and learn a little bit about Mad King Ludwig, so I think this one, the Foundations of Rome, is a little bit more straightforward and understanding what I'm looking at. It's very much nicely set together. I like that the arrow tracks tell you how to score. Everything is right there, right in front of you, and it's really simple and easy to look at and understand. Pete?
The production on both of these games is fantastic, and that's really a toss-up to me on that. So what it's really going to come down to me for in the game is the theme, and Castles of Mad King Ludwig just gives me more of the theme. I feel like I'm actually building something. I have agency over what I'm doing, and for me, that's going to be the winner. Chris, am I all alone, or what's your plan?
So I absolutely love the theme of Castles of Mad King Ludwig. And I think the theme comes out as you're playing it. However, as much as the theme comes out for me, the production on Foundations of Rome is just over the top. Those things are beautiful. The table presence of that game is like no other. I think it's incredibly well done. It may not be the deepest game ever, but that production is just spot on. I'm going with Foundations of Rome, which means by a 3-1 count, Foundations of Rome takes the first category, theme and production. So let's go on to mechanisms, and I'll kick it right back to Pete.
Yeah, mechanisms for me, I like the auction in Castles of Mad King Ludwig better than the Foundations of Rome. That's the core mechanic for me. I think each has also the placement of the tiles that you're getting or the buildings. But for me, it's the auction, I think, is really what elevates the game over the other. So I'm going to go with Castles of Mad King Ludwig. David, where are you at on this game?
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with you on this one, Pete. I'm going to go with Foundations on this one. I think that the mechanism, although it's simple, the auction, I think there's so much more depth when you're looking at how and when you use your timing to play the pieces on the board. To me, maybe I'm a chess player and I like checkers too. I think it's a good combination of both. It leans more towards checkers, but it's fast. It's something that's, I'm not waiting around. I'm not sitting in my seat. I'm not trying to figure it out too much. It's not a huge brain burn. And so for that reason, I just like the mechanism better. I think it's just simple for what it is, but yet there's a lot of complexity on the back end if you actually play this game a lot. I'm going to kick it over to Daniela.
Yeah, so as we're talking about this and looking at the tile placement of this game, I like Castles of Mad King Ludwig for this one. I like how I am in charge of placing a lot of these tiles on my own board. Nobody is interacting with my space as it is in with Foundations of Rome. I like a lot of the extra bonus cards, the decrees, the room cards, like the King's Favors. There's a lot more in this that I feel I can get out of the game when I'm playing. And so for that, the mechanisms work for me here best. Chris, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Castles of Mad King Ludwig as well. I agree that there is an aspect of that auction in Foundations that can be interesting. I find Castles of Mad King Ludwig's auction or sale even more interesting. And then I just love the way you have to pair that with putting your castles together. To me, Mad King Ludwig on mechanisms blows it away. That's a 3-1 victory for Castles of Mad King Ludwig. It's now 1-1 in our competition, and we go to value for your time. I'll start with Daniela.
All right, so value for your time, we've talked about Foundations of Rome. It's about 30, 40 minutes, depending on if you know the game or not, and probably depending on how many people you're playing with, probably more for if you're playing with a 5-player person. For the Castles of Mad King Ludwig, we're looking at probably an hour and a half about per game. For me, there's a lot of setup for both of these games. There's more for castles. However, I will say for my time and what I want to play, it's going to go to Mad King Ludwig. David, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with you on this one again. I think if we include setup and scoring time, and we add it onto our game playing time for Castles of Mad King Ludwig, I think we're running around 2 hours normally on that game. We're about an hour and a half of gameplay, plus about 15 minutes of setup, plus about another 15 minutes for scoring. When I can basically just get out Foundations, set up a tray in front of everybody, and then we just go. And I think that, to me, that simplicity of that just kind of outweighs all the complexity. And if I'm going to set up a game that's going to take me about 15 to 20 minutes to set up with all the different tiles and shuffling and doing all this, I would play something else. So for me, I'm going to go with Foundations on this one. I'm going to kick it off to Chris.
Yeah, I know that Foundations of Rome is a quicker play and that Castles of Mad King Ludwig definitely has more setup and put away time. But to me, it's not just about how fast it plays. It's what did I get out of that time? And I think when I'm playing Castles of Mad King Ludwig, I'm fully engaged. I'm getting a lot out of that. And Foundations of Rome, for me at least, I don't know that I'm really getting a huge amount for my time. And for that reason, I'm going to go with Castles of Mad King Ludwig and kick it over to Pete.
Well, I did a cost over time chart here. And for the price of the game, quite honestly, that is how much you're going to pay for it. And yeah, maybe if you get a smaller version, that cost is going to come down. But again, I agree with you, Chris. When I'm playing Castles of Mad King Ludwig, it does not feel like it's an hour and a half. It just feels right. I'm always engaged in the game. I'm looking around. Castles of Mad King Ludwig's going to take it for me.
All right, so 3-1 again. Mad King Ludwig takes value for your time. 2-1 lead now, but we're going on to replayability. I'm going to start this one. I'm going to stick with Castles of Mad King Ludwig again. I think for me, Foundations of Rome, and maybe that's just the case that, hey, it's the level of game it is. It gets pretty samey for me if I'm playing it multiple times. I mentioned earlier, I've played Castles of Mad King Ludwig a lot lately. I'm still enjoying it. There's a lot of different King's Favors that can come out in different combinations, and those things combined with your own personal goals, I think make for a lot of different experiences. I'm going with Castles of Mad King Ludwig. David, you've been Foundations all the way down. Are you still there?
I am still there, actually. I just think that replayability, I think that there is a lot going on, but I also think that every game is just different because you don't know what plots you're going to get. And I get that there's a lot of different stuff involved with Castles of Mad King, but I just feel like I just don't see enough cards every time I come up. Maybe I'm playing the game wrong, but I feel like I never get to see enough. It's kind of the same problem I have with Wingspan, which I'm not seeing the right birds. Maybe I'm building my engine around there too, but I just don't feel that I have agency in that game. So for replayability and the fact that I have agency over what I do, I feel like more than Mad Castles, I'm going to keep going with Foundations of Rome on this one. I'm going to pass it over to Daniela.
Well, you're going to be sitting at the table alone again. For me, yeah, setting up these games, getting them out, replayability. I've looked at Castles numerous different ways. I played it really bad one time. I knew that I was playing it poorly. I came back again a different day, played it totally different again, focusing on what I needed to. And that's kind of what I want to see in a game. I want to see how many different ways, how many different types of tracks I can go on to win a game and see what that is for me. Foundations of Rome being set up on the table, I'm skipping it every single time. I actually don't want to ever play it again. Pete.
Yeah, I agree with Chris and Daniela. Castles is the winner for me. There's not much more to say that you guys didn't already say. There's just more replay in the base game, at least the version that I played, and it always feels like a different game. I always feel like I build a different castle. Every time I play it, I'm going to have fun. I may not want to play it every time, but I do. When I do play it, I enjoy it.
All right, so 3-1 again. Castles of Mad King Ludwig takes it over David. Over Foundations of Rome. Now up 3-1 in categories. We're going to go to our last category anyway, just to see if it's a total beatdown or if Foundations of Rome can make it a close one. This is the fun factor. David, I'll start with you.
Good. I'm glad you started with me because the people are actually on my side on this. Let's look at the BGG ratings here. 8.1 versus 7.5. There's a reason for this.
That's like the
fun factor to me. It's all about Foundations. There's more loud moments of people saying not the greatest language. When somebody buys their square, you don't hear anybody shouting at when you play Castles because everybody's looking at their own board. When you have that player interaction, you're out on the board, you're screwing other people. This is where the fun's at. There's more loud moments. I like it better. I think people will agree with me. So if you don't, come out and vote for it online. But I'm going to go and stick with my guns, Foundations all day. I'm going to pass it off to Pete.
All my votes have been Castles of Mad King Ludwig. That's really where the fun is for me. Like I said, I enjoy both games. I just think the Foundations of Rome is just a little bit too basic for me. It might be a great game for other people, and hopefully you guys take into what we're talking about on what you like to do. You could be on David's side or you can be on my side, but either way, play the game that's the most fun for you. For me, it's Castles. Chris.
Yeah, David's got me thinking here because he's right. When we're playing Foundations of Rome, there is a lot of tension, wondering if someone's going to steal that plot out from under you. There is a lot of, come on, I can't believe you took that. And I'm not sure what other parts of the game I look at and say, man, that was super fun. Whereas Mad King Ludwig, I'm always having fun doing that. I'm sticking with the Mad King. Maybe it's because I'm crazy as the Mad King. I don't know. It's still Mad King for me. Daniela, what do you think?
Listen, everybody knows the ratings are just like the critics' ratings on movies. You never go with them. You always go with the audience. So, audience, we need your help and participation. What are you guys thinking on this? But for me, fun factor, I really like the puzzles within the puzzles. I didn't like the simplicity in Rome, but I can understand David's point. I do think, to be objective, there is a little bit more probably interaction with each other, but I still feel like there's a little bit of that gotcha too, because there were certain parts in King Ludwig where we're looking at the tiles that we want. Same thing with the track on the deeds, and you're going, I'm not going to look at that because I know someone's going to pull it out in front of me. So there's a little bit of stuff there as well.
I was looking away. Yeah. I didn't want to give anything away. I didn't want Chris to snag the one I want,
you
and
can
it
see all
worked.
those small little symbols and stuff going on there. Is that a door? Is that not a door over on that side?
All right. Well, we're all mad here, so we're staying with Mad King on this.
All right, so 3-1 again. Castles of Mad King Ludwig takes the fun factor, and with a score of 4-1, Castles of Mad King Ludwig goes crazy and wins this Battle of the Funnest.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of yet another episode of the Fifth Meeple Board Game Podcast. We hope you enjoyed what we constructed today. And if you'd like to get in touch, just email us at thefifthmeeple@gmail.com or give us a shout out on Facebook or Instagram. Thanks again for listening. And until next time, may the foundation of your game world always be solid. Goodbye, everyone.
See ya.
Thanks for listening.
Play some more games.
You get a deck that just doesn't. I'm talking about decks again.
Yeah. I think at that point, I would just go for the biggest deck.
Yeah.
Make the most points out of it.
There you go.
Okay, don't put that. Okay.
Shuffle it up and see what comes out. All right.
So let's head to the collector's.
That you didn't sound like you thought it was a great conversation. Yeah, whatever.
What am I saying? The porticus?
Portcullis.
Portcullis? For the
You know what that is?
Portcullis on this. No.
That's the
the
big
gate.
cage that comes down. Yeah,
Okay.
the big gate that comes down. If David whips it out and
David, don't whip it out. You got enough popping, you know. He's like chugging it.
Here comes the burp.
all right, let's
Al.
go.
Blah, 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 blah.